So I've just hit record. Sean and I caught up just for a few minutes there, and after a prayer, I press record, and here we are. So I was sharing with Sean off camera just a moment ago of all the episodes we've ever done on the Simplify podcast, and now the Keep It Simple podcast, this newest reiteration of the pod, his episode and the Train Trestle Ministry. By far, probably 3 times is the most listened to episode we've ever recorded and put out. I still get texts. I get texts about Connor. I get texts about Hayden Martin. And I get texts about Sean King. And our people are wanting to know where you are and how you are. But before we get into all of that, where you are now and the train trestle and how that has morphed and what you're up to now, for so many of our new followers, listeners, they will not be familiar with you or your story, not familiar with our relationship. And so let's just kind of start there and come through, kind of catch people up to speed. So you and I know each other. We have known each other since I was, I think, 17 years old. So that's 29 years now that we have known one another. And very little known fact, you are the reason that I was in rodeo. And we covered a snippet of that in the first episode 3 years ago. But without you, and without you calling me up, taking a chance on a ragtag kid and hauling me all over to Alabama and all over the place, putting me in front of bulls, I would have not had that launching point for that part of my life. And then there was a season there then that we kind of separated ways. I went into the rodeo world, and you went into the motorcycle world. Mm-hmm. And so let's start there. Let's start kind of where we separated and where you landed in that, and then what happened from the time that our paths kind of split until God brought our paths back together. There, that would have been probably 2009 or 10. I can't remember, 10 or 11, but
I don't know.
Yeah. So for those of you that don't know you, let's pick up at your transition from rodeo and how did you end up in the motorcycle realm? Let's start there.
Well, in that rodeo lifestyle, there's a ton of adrenaline to start with. Mm-hmm. And that's ultimately what fuels so many of us to even chase after that. Mm-hmm. And for me, the next step was I sat back and I was like, well, now who am I? I had an identity crisis. It's like, well, okay. I was a rodeo cowboy. Mm-hmm. Well, if I quit rodeoing, now I'm no longer a rodeo cowboy. What am I? Mm-hmm. And for me, I felt a strong draw. A friend of mine, Shannon, had a motorcycle.
Yeah, Shannon Buckner.
Yeah. He bought that bike, and I saw that, and I was like, you know what? That's what I'm going to do.
Who, by the way, was
incredible.
Try not to use profanity. He was a bad man on that sucker. So he could ride bulls, man.
Before we go there, hold on a second. I just got to tell everybody listening that you gave me credit for launching you, but let me tell you something, man. You, for those not knowing, are an absolute athlete. I mean, a true, fast. The second that I saw you move, mm-hmm. I knew you were destined to do a whole lot more than what I was rolling with. All right. I know. So anyway, Shannon Buckner had bought this motorcycle,
and he was a bad man.
He is a bad man.
He was a good human, but in the bull riding, that was a bad man.
Yes, sir. He'd get your money quick
in a minute.
So I saw that, and I decided, you know what, I'm going to go start looking at some motorcycles. Mm-hmm. And we were going to a funeral, and just the way it worked out, we were headed to a funeral for a guy that we all knew and worked with. Um, and they said, whatever you do, don't go by the Easy Riders in Atlanta. There's a motorcycle in there, and you'll buy it. You can't really tell me not to do something, man. It's not going to work out that well.
Yeah.
If you didn't want me to buy the bike, just don't even tell me it existed, right? So what I do, I drive back, I see the bike, and I'm trying to do better with my money a little bit at the time. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to walk away. So I literally left it sitting there. Mm-hmm. 2 days later, I grabbed my little brother. I said, you're my no guy. I said, you're supposed to tell me no 100 times. We're going to go up here, and we're probably going to buy this bike. I mean, I carried a trailer with me, come on. So I get up there, sure enough, I see it, and man, it's like, oh gosh. And so we sat down, and, he's over there saying, no. I ain't hearing any of it. And finally I just said,
Tommy?
This is Tommy. I said, I looked at him, I said, it's over with. We're going to get the bike. So carry it home.
And I was living with you. We were roommates. I was living with you
at the house,
at your place out on Nitrogen Road in that season. I remember you bringing that big old chopper.
Man, it had all motor and nothing else. That thing, still to this day, had more power to weight ratio than anything else I've owned. And we all took turns riding it down the road and back because it was so daggone cold and we were about to freeze to death, just, quarter mile, half mile at a time.
Yeah.
And so anyway, from that right there, I just started.
Well, if you're watching this, somehow Sean there got cut off. I'm going to leave the session running. If I know him, he will log back in a moment and rejoin the room. We talk about authenticity. We talk about intentionally eliminating the polish and the post-production to make things slick. So here we are in episode 3, and you're fixing to get a real dose of just how sincere we are in that. So we'll hang out here a few minutes and see if Sean is able to join back up with us. All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome. Thanks for joining us for episode 3. After just a few minutes of catching up offline before I hit record and then a prayer, here we are. I hit record and we are into episode 3. So today I'm super excited. We have coming back to the podcast one of my most favorite people in the world, truly. My friend Sean King. And so some of you know Sean in the very first version, the first year that we tried our hand at recording podcast episodes. Sean came on and he was hands down. His episode was 3 times over the most listened. It got the most listens by 3 times of everything else. And to date, there's kind of 3 people that folks text me to ask me how they are and where they are, and just for updates. That's Connor Henderson, who was episode 1, and then now Sean King. Folks text to ask about, and then here in the coming weeks, we're going to have Hayden Martin on. A lot of you know and remember Hayden, but today's Sean. And so, just a little backstory, kind of quickly. Sean King is, for me, is a lifelong friend. I met Sean when I was a teenager. He saw something in me that others overlooked. He invested in me relationally, professionally, financially, emotionally. Physically, he pushed me, took me. He went through a bodybuilding phase and really kind of pressed me to take health serious. And so, in all these ways and more, Sean has been a constant in my life and in the lives of so many others. And so, so when I was lining out who to interview and when, Sean was top of the list. And so, Sean, just I guess a great jumping off point for you to hop in. So you and I rodeoed together. Sean was a bullfighter. He's a bull rider. He's a bullfighter. And so Sean and I fought bulls together. At one point, we lived together. Sean had property and a home and allowed me to live with him as a roommate there. And we rodeoed together, we lived together, we worked together through different channels, I guess by default. In a way, Sean was my boss's boss. And so there's been all these different layers to our relationship. But then there was a season where our lives our paths forked. And I went all out 100% in the rodeo game. And you went a different direction. And so let's start there. Let's talk about that direction, where you headed and why, what led up to that. I think that'd be a really good place to start.
Right on, man. Well, thank you. And I could say all those exact same things about how you poured into my life and are still pouring into my life. For the interest of this podcast, instead of just gushing over you the whole time, I'm just going to get in it. All right, brother?
Please, yes.
So when I quit rodeoing, I had a huge identity crisis all of a sudden. It was shortly after getting my first divorce, and so for me, a friend of ours, Shannon Buckner, who absolutely is a bad man, especially
on the back of a bull.
Yeah, yes, sir.
Sucker could.
He'd get your money. He'd get your money.
Shinbone would take it to him, wouldn't he?
He would. So that being said, anyway, he had a motorcycle. And I saw it. And one day we were headed to a funeral. And I don't know if it was before that or right after that. They said, whatever you do, don't go buy Easy Riders in Atlanta if you're wanting a motorcycle. They got one in the window and you'll have to buy it. That didn't work out. Don't ever tell me not to do something, man. If you don't want me to if you didn't want me to get the bike, just tell me it didn't exist. Don't even bring it up, right?
Yeah.
So, way back from that funeral, I stop and I look at it, and somehow I managed to drive away that day. But that Monday, I returned with a trailer and my little brother, who was supposed to talk me out of it. I think having the trailer on the back of the truck probably sealed the deal before I ever got there looking back. Yeah. But so anyway, I'm sitting there, and next thing you know, on a motorcycle, and you were living with me at the time, and we all took turns riding that thing up and down the road because it was so cold outside. Anyway.
And that sucker was fast.
Man, that hands down.
It was fast.
Power to weight ratio, that's still the baddest bike I've ridden. And I've ridden a ton. But, So, I don't do anything just a little bit. Either I'm all in or I'm all out. And
It's one of the things I love most about you.
well, thank you. It can be in this case, it turned out to not necessarily be a great thing though. So I bought this motorcycle and I started riding, and I surrounded myself with. First thing I did was I went to the Harley shop, started picking up all these little magazines, little rags as we call them, that would promote different events, and eventually found me a little group that met on Saturdays and would ride a little bit. I just started making friends, which isn't hard to do for me. I tend to can get in and fit in almost anywhere. I've just learned how to be a chameleon, which really and truly was kind of part of my problem. I didn't know who I was, but we'll get to that.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, I rode that bike for years. The first year I got it. So the first trip was to Panama City. The second trip was to Myrtle Beach. Third trip was to Sturgis. Fourth trip was to Daytona. Fifth trip was to Panama City. And I thought this was normal because coming from a rodeo background, we went everywhere every weekend, right?
Yeah.
You're never home. So
right.
if you're home, that means you're not doing too good, right?
Yeah.
So for to hit the 5 major rallies in 1 year was unheard of. What? Did it all the very first year I had it. So
the intensity and the focus that you had channeled at rodeo had just shifted.
Gotcha. Just shifted intensity completely.
Gotcha.
And so I rode that same bike for about 5 years, and finally somebody wanted to ride it that had a dresser, what we would call a bagger. It's a Harley Davidson that's all fully decked out, right? I sat on it and rode it about 20 miles. And I got off, and man, when I tell you, Ben, I was mad. I wasn't a little bit mad. I was ticked.
Hey, you there?
Hey, you there?
Yeah. I heard you say you wasn't a little bit mad. You were ticked.
I was ticked off, man.
Yeah.
So I thought everybody's motorcycle rode the same as mine. And that's not the case at all.
Yeah.
So once I realized how comfortable they were, I told them, I said, each one of y'all owes me a Purple Heart for keeping up with y'all and riding as far as I did, doing everything. I said, y'all been riding on this stuff. I said, you never told me. He goes, we thought you knew. I said, nah. So it wasn't long after that, maybe 6 months, I owned a bagger of my own. And I think the first trip on it was to Savannah and back in a day, just to put 500 miles on it. Went to Savannah, to Atlanta and back. And then the next weekend we went to Arkansas to see my cousins.
Yeah.
So now I took something that was, kind of hard to ride and got on something that was easy. And now I was ready to go everywhere. So fast forward, a couple of years, I kept making different friends. And each time it was, it was alcohol and motorcycles and going fast and riding crazy. Well, eventually I met a guy, and he was in a motorcycle club, and I decided, you know what? I bet you he rides a lot. All my friends would be too drunk on Sundays to ride, and that's the only day they really wanted to ride at the time. And I was like, look, man, I want to go. I don't want to sit over here and lay around and do all this other stuff. I want to go. So I met this guy, and he took me on my first trip. I mean, Ben, I'm going to tell you, this is how it went. He called me and said, hey, man, we got this ride, and you can go on it if you want to. I said, really? He said, yeah. I said, where are we going? He said, about 3 gas stops. I said, man, that's cool. I'm in.
So like 3 tanks of gas?
3 tanks of gas. That's all he told me. So I was like, okay, where do you want me to meet you? He told me, and so I was like, okay, I'll be there. I got off the phone. I immediately called him back and said, hey, man, we tenting it, or are we going to be in a room? He goes, bring your tent. I said, okay. Got off the phone, no problem. That was my first trip with the Outlaws Motorcycle Club.
Okay.
And at that point, I was sealed. I wanted to do that. I thought that was the coolest thing. I mean, I had made a ton of other choices in my life, between the alcohol and some drugs here and there, and nothing I'm proud of. But now I'm over here in this setting, and man, these guys are supposed to be riding everywhere. Now I had a drinking problem, but I didn't know I had a drinking problem at the time, and I was surrounding myself with people who loved motorcycles, who loved to drink, didn't mind fighting. Everything. I mean, right up my alley, man. Sign me up. So now
Yeah.
I found another group of people to hang out with that were just, it was everything I wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
So I hung around them for probably a year and a half, I guess, maybe two. And the opportunity came to become a probate for
What
this
does that
motorcycle
mean?
club. So they have
Is it like being on your permit?
yes, it's a lot like being on your permit. But you're proving yourself to be worthy of wearing that patch.
And
The outlaws.
what does that proving look like? Is that
Uh, it's a lot of long nights, early mornings, a lot of riding, a lot of abuse, a lot of let's see what you're going to do in tight situations. They
okay?
put you through a fire to see how you're going to handle yourself, and
Okay.
it's not a comfortable situation for most. And at best, you want to lash out at the people who are testing you, but there's more of them than there are you.
Yeah.
So there's only so
Yeah.
much you can do, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
but eventually, I passed out into the club, and
How
I was
long did
gone.
that take?
Right at a year, almost a
Okay.
year, almost a full year.
Okay.
And during that time, I mean, as a probate, I think I was away from the house probably 32 out of 46 weeks, something like that.
Wow.
Weekends.
Yeah.
You would routinely give up at least one day a week, if not two, and then almost every weekend. I mean, I was home. I'm home. When I say uh, out of the house, I mean not leaving Georgia.
Right.
Those
Right.
other 13 weekends. There was only like 2 weekends as a probate that I actually didn't have to go anywhere, and even then I went somewhere.
Right. Yeah.
So then you patch out, and all of a sudden you got to make your own decisions, and they got certain things you have to do and certain places you need to go, and so I was all about that, and we were riding. I mean, it was still it just upped the ante, and
Mm-hmm.
trying to choose my words here, but it's not
Yeah. Yeah.
necessarily the Boy Scouts, right?
Right.
Well, the Outlaws are a 1% club, and as such, they're not Boy Scouts.
Mm-hmm.
So we wound up. It wasn't maybe 3 months, if that, after I patched in, that somebody we had been hanging around with, not to dive all the way in it, but bottom line, the FBI had placed an undercover agent into a support club.
Mm-hmm.
And one night we were all sitting around, and his name come up, and there were just so many lies that had been told to us that there was only one of two things: either this guy was a habitual liar, or he was rat.
Mm-hmm.
So we made a couple phone calls and decided that we needed to shut down a clubhouse. So that's what
Can
happened.
you talk about your role, like your specific role, or not?
I'm going to
Not
tell you
really.
about this one. I'll tell you about this one instance, okay?
Not
Okay.
that instance. I mean, in the club, the role that you served, there were specific guys.
Let me get on up through there.
Okay.
Some of that comes a little bit later on.
Okay. Okay.
At this point, I'm just a regular old outlaw. I didn't
Okay.
have any titles or anything, but we all sat around that night and decided we needed to shut them down. When I looked around, I was the guy. I knew I had to go do it. I had helped this guy financially to get a motorcycle, and some things transpired via text where, uh, you know, he knew I was already mad at him, and so I went up there, and I took one other guy with me, and we went up there and shut down that clubhouse of about 13 men. Um, that was probably it's pretty dicey. I'm not going to say it was the diciest thing I ever did, but it was pretty dicey. You know, you go in there and start telling 13 people they got to give you their cut.
Which is the vest.
Their vest itself, and
Okay.
that you're not leaving without it. And this is something that each one of them had to work for as well. But we walked out of there, we left with it, and next thing you know, there's probably another 30 days, if that, the feds came. And they arrested me. I went to, they took me to Gainesville. I had never been arrested before.
Gainesville, Florida or Georgia?
Gainesville, Georgia. Gainesville, Georgia.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Because the other clubhouse was up towards Helen, up in that area.
So they came after you for what you did in closing down that. Okay, I'm with you.
There's a ton of other things that were going on that I had no knowledge of, but at the time, you know, that's what they came for. Okay. So I spent the next 2 years and like 4 months under pretrial indictment. Now, you know, in that world, if you're not, how do I say this? Everybody was scared I was a rat or that I had made a deal to get back onto the street because the feds don't let you, they don't give us bond. They don't give us bail. You know, you ride around and you know that your phone's tapped. You know that people have the right to come in and toss your house at any point in time because they did a couple times. It's brother, I was in a dark place.
And I remember so from the flip side of that, right? I talked about our paths had our paths had crossed. Nothing bad at all. No. It's just I hit the rodeo trail and I kind of lost track of what you were up to. And then fast forward years later, as this is going on in your life, and I'm rodeoing, and I get married and start having babies, and kind of scale down to the southeast. And one day, I get a phone call from you, and we start to catch up, and you asked me to come over, right? And so my flip side of that, and this is one of my favorite Sean King stories, because I go in, and like I haven't seen you. And just on the phone, I could hear in your voice, because I know you, I could hear like hurt, worry, brokenness, all of those things. I could hear that. And so I'm driving over and I'm like, you know, I'm like, Lord, what am I getting into? You know, this is my guy. Like, I love this guy, but I really am not sure what I'm driving into. Yeah. And so, this is the part to me that is so funny now. So I pull up to your house and, you know, the garage door's up, beautiful, big 2-story house, garage door's up and all these bikes, you know, and I'm like, okay, this is Sean that I know. And you come walking out, you know, and tattoos and all this, you know, and I'm like, okay, it's still Sean that I know. And so you invite me in and we get inside. You cannot make this stuff up. You turned around and you said, have you got a cell phone? And I said, yeah. And you said, give it to me. And I'm like, why? And you're like, have you got a cell phone? Yeah, give it to me. And at this point, I'm like, I probably ought to give this man my cell phone. And so I push the cell phone out, you know, and hand it to you. And you take your cell phone. Do you remember this? You take your cell phone and my cell phone and you put it in your microwave and you shut it. You didn't turn it on, thankfully, but you put our phones in your microwave and shut it. And I'm like, dude, what's going on? And that's when you start then to explain to me that that through the phones and through any interactions and stuff, that folks have the ability then to tap in and listen, and that by putting our phones in the box and shutting it in the microwave and shutting it, then that they were not able to do that. And even then, like, I know you, I love you, and I trust you, but even then, in my mind, I'm like, Father, what am I into here? So from the flip side, I can tell you that was, like I said, it's still to date one of my favorite Sean King stories, because I'm all in. I'm like, either this is going to be really good or this is going to be really bad, but either way, I'm in.
Man, yeah. So, I mean, life had degraded to that, brother. I mean, I looked over my shoulder, and if I didn't know you and you said hello, I might just hit you.
Yeah.
I mean, just because I don't know where you're coming from. I don't know who you are. I don't know what your intent with me is. And, the paperwork that they handed me when I got out of when they released me, it said the United States of America versus Sean King. So when you stop and let that sink in, that means my dad, my mom, my sister. It means you, everybody, by proxy, are against me. And that'll put a man on an island right off the rip. And so at that point, I'm surrounded by people who, the easiest way to say it is the good guys were scared of me and the bad guys were scared of me.
Yeah.
And so
I think I was a good guy and I was scared.
Well, I mean, there was a lot of people were scared to just be around me. It's like, oh, I can't tell him anything. I don't want to be around him because he might be rolled or whatever. And then the good guys were like, oh my God, he's such a dangerous man, and this, that, and another. And I had kept a lot of my junk to myself. I tried to keep my trash on my side of the street and, give them the window dressing. I was good at wearing a mask and hiding things. And so, I survived that and went to trial. And there's a ton of stories I could dive off in. Everything.
Sure.
You remember Phil Broom?
Oh yeah, Sharp and I were just talking about Phil. That guy, he's like my relationship with you and my relationship with Sharp. He's one of those guys. I love that guy.
I tried to call him today, and evidently it's the wrong number. But in thinking about this, I was like, man, let me just touch base with him. But anyway, he's got some stories of me in those days, and I got some stories of him in those days. And so, anyway, I wound up getting all the way through. I went to trial, and after 3 days of prosecutor testimony, literally that judge banged the gavel, and it's just a God thing that no evidence of a crime had been presented enough for any reasonable jury to find a conviction.
Okay.
And so, I mean, we had no defense. We did everything they said I did in that indictment, but it's just whether it was against the law or not, And so, we get out of the trial, and that's when things, started escalating for me.
Okay.
I wound
what does that look like?
Well, first off, I wanted to get out of Georgia.
Okay.
Because I felt like this entire state was too small for me. I needed a new start. So I go to Alabama, and in my best thinking, I found I found a stripper, and we got married. And that's part of the devastation that I left in my wake is a whole nother family that just got destroyed in all of this just because of my behavior and the way I acted. But once I got to Alabama, I wound up being a chapter boss because all of a sudden,
what does that mean?
That means that I'm responsible for all the outlaws that report to that area. So it would have been a town, and the town, whatever town where we had a chapter, all the outlaws in there, I would have been ultimately responsible for.
Wow.
And, because I had held my mud and because I beat that case, there was a couple people who would, when I'd come walking up, would call me Teflon Sean. nothing sticks, right?
Yeah.
So,
which I'm sure is good for the ego. I mean,
oh yeah, my head was wider than my shoulders. My shoulders are pretty wide anyway.
Yes, they
so
are.
now I had to turn sideways to get through a 3-foot door.
Yeah.
And instead of, if I'd have had half a brain or half a heart or been anywhere close to God at that point in my life, I would have immediately gotten out and ran, hide, and just get away.
Yeah.
But in my state of mind, I was ready for a victory lap.
And so looking back, do you think the original indictment, the case, do you think that God could have used that to take you in a different direction, but you didn't take that? You and I talked one time about how there are dots on the timeline and we go on these walkabouts. Do you think that the original indictment, the case, and the not guilty, do you think that in that season God was trying to give you this out and you just didn't see it or take it?
Absolutely, because ultimately, so while I'm there, like I said, I was married, and she had a little daughter, a little blonde-haired, blue-eyed girl. She was 6 years old, and that girl still got a small piece of my heart to this day.
Amen.
And she, I didn't want anything but the best for her, and I didn't want her to know the worst of me, right? So one day some stuff went down, and I knew in the back of my head, because of that trial and because of everything I went through, in my head, they were always going to be after me. They were always going to look for their chance to finally get me and put me behind bars.
They being the government, the feds.
Yes, government, FBI, somebody. Yeah. And so that night I went home.
Your screen.
Are you there?
Your screen just flipped upside down.
Man, your voice sounds like Mickey Mouse right now in my ears.
Your screen. I wish you could see what I'm seeing. So, for those of you, I don't know what this is going to be like when we put it out, but if you happen to watch this on YouTube, we said from the beginning, from episode 1, we said there's not going to be any post-production, and we're not worried about the polish. We're not trying to entertain people. We're trying to encourage folks to engage in authentic communities and in authentic relationships. So I don't know what you're going to end up seeing on the YouTube video, but right now on my screen, Sean, your head is upside down.
Hey, you there now? I'm trying to get back to you.
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
I'm going to tell you now. Yeah, I can hear you. I'm going to tell you, man, I think the devil must not want this story to be told, huh?
Maybe, but we're going to keep trucking. Even if you're upside down, I can hear you. Keep on talking.
All right, brother. So
you lived life with this idea that you were always going to have to be looking over your shoulder, that you had gotten off, but in your mind they were going to keep coming after you until they could pin something on you.
Absolutely, and that's going to result in me doing life in prison.
Okay.
And the scary part to that, I wasn't worried about that at the time, believe it or not. It was, I know the way that they came to arrest me the last time, where they send 21 FBI agents to my house to arrest me, and they came in using flashbangs.
Okay.
All I can picture is them doing that. Hey, I think I'm back.
You are.
All I can picture is them coming in that house with that 6-year-old girl, and
man.
And then I react, trying to protect her, to calm her, and my fast movements are the reason why they shoot me, and that's how I go out. Now I've got a 6-year-old girl who's looking and having to deal with seeing that happen in front of her, whether I die or not. But now she's got to deal with the hurts that caused. And so I knew then I had to leave the club, period.
Oh, wow.
Okay. So anytime somebody leaves the club, there's always a process. There's always a way to get out. And if you follow the process, then you wind up out good. If you don't, then you wind up out bad. And, I've never done anything, half-assed, just to say it straight.
Sure.
And so I did it right, and I wound up out good. And
so you left in good graces.
You left in good graces.
Look over your shoulder.
No, I'm welcome. And there's a couple of people who just don't like the fact that I left, but other than that, they're not out looking for me.
Great.
So then I wound up being around the house, and I realized very quickly that, all those weekends away, I didn't know what was going on in my own home. And it wasn't very long, and I needed to get out of there. I just needed to put some distance in between me and there. And, out of respect for everybody involved over there, I'm not going to get into why I left there. But I came back home. So I came back home, and that's when I called you the next time to come over.
Yeah.
And for the folks listening, man, so here's a guy who's just been wearing a patch for a while, who did it at the highest level of motorcycle clubs. And I'm sitting there, and Ben comes in, and we're talking, and we talked about a lot that day. And I confessed some things to you that I have only told 2 other people in my life. And then while I'm sitting there, he starts telling me, he says, "Man, let me tell you about this place." I'm like, "What?" He goes, "Yeah, there's 7 bridges, man. They go out in the homeless and this, that, and other. Yeah, they're a bunch of bikers."
They're bikers.
Up until you said that, you had me. And so I'm like, "Nope, that's not for me." Well, back up a little bit. I'd had a heart attack. And when I come up out of that heart attack, for the first time in my life, I knew that God spoke. Because in between my head coming off the pillow and my feet hitting the floor, he gave me 3 things to do. Number 1, find a church where you feel like you're hearing the gospel for the very first time. Number 2, put forth the same effort into finding people who will do Christian life with you like you used to do to find people who do illegal stuff with you.
Ooh, man, come on.
No more effort, just the same. And then the 3rd thing was walk through any door I put in front of you. So when you told me that about this 7 Bridges place, I'm like, "No, that's not for me. That's not a door." I don't know where he's coming from with that. Mm-hmm. And so it wasn't long after that. I think we had a second talk at the house, and our third talk, I guess. And you brought him up again. I'm like, "It's not for me, man." And the whole time I'm taking about 6 months to just run around. I'm going to churches, Korean churches. I went to.
Oh, I remember.
It was craziness, man. I felt like every message was for me. God was moving in me like crazy.
It was beautiful.
It was incredible.
But I mean, you'd call me almost every Sunday afternoon. You called me, and one week you were in an African American church over on Shirley Drive, and the next week you were downtown on somewhere Cherry Street or something at a Korean church, and and it's like I think somewhere in there you were at a Quaker church or something, or and I'm like, you were all of the intensity and the passion that had been in rodeo and then had been in motorcycles had shifted, and that's the way that God made you, and it finally found the right channel.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I turned it down the second time, and then a third time you're talking to me, and you bring it up, and I'm like, "Man, that 3rd thing, walk through any door." All right, Ben, shoot me that guy's number or something, and I'll send him a text. And I was praying in my head. I didn't say it to God, but I was thinking to myself, "Please don't answer. don't respond.
It was David Johnson. David's still
Yeah.
my friend. David and I are still friends.
He's an incredible guy.
Yeah, he's amazing.
Man, amazing fella. So finally I get in touch with him. He calls me back, and I'm like, all right, God, if this is meant to be, then fine. And I go up there, and, I saw these people, and what a beautiful place, that Seven Bridges, the heart of that, the design. They're out there taking sack lunches, and if people want to come off that street and try and live up to their standards, man, they don't have to be there another minute. And so I did that 2 or 3 times, I think. And then one morning I got up, or actually I should start the night before, because I was dating at the time my wife now. And I'm sitting there, and like that Thursday before, he made it very clear, again, God speaks, and she and I couldn't be together. I don't know. He just flat told me, and just to use his words, is she's not going where I'm taking you.
Wow.
And so, out of obedience, I tried to do it the best way I could, and wound up breaking up with her that night. But it took late into the night to do it, and I was supposed to go to Seven Bridges the next morning, and I forgot to set my phone. The phone did just like it did earlier for us. It actually died on me. And so I got up, and in between waking up and my feet hitting the floor, God spoke to me again. It's like, do it in Macon. And I was like, oh, okay. So I go up to Walmart, make some hygiene packs up, and head out. And I'm headed, and somebody else had invited me to the H&H restaurant to eat lunch with a guy that was had a day pass from rehab. And I'm on my way there, and literally like 150 yards from the building over there, where that church is torn down.
Oh yeah.
There's a guy walking up the street. I'm like, wow, okay, this must be my guy. First one, might as well. So I pull into the parking lot. Now, for everybody out there, I don't mean this, don't take this wrong, but the guy was black. I'm white, and I look like this. And typically they get nervous around me, okay? I mean, especially when I roll up in a tinted window truck, I hit the roll down button, I look out the window and go, hey man, you homeless? Those were my words, Ben. And he's
probably like, not the best approach.
Yeah, nothing wrong with this idea right here. Nothing wrong at all with this picture.
Yeah.
And so the second I said, I was like, oh, look, man, I got some hygiene packs over here. If you'd like one, I'd love to give one to you. And he looks at me and goes, okay. And so I ease around the truck. I hadn't even made them up. They were still in the bags from Walmart. So I made one up real quick and handed it to him, asked him, could I pray with him? I was praying with him. I got done. I looked at him and said, man, you hungry? He's like, yeah. So next thing you know, we take him to lunch down there at H&H, man. And I'm trying to act like I know the guy. It ain't 5 minutes in. They know I don't know who the heck this guy is. And I just come clean and told him, so look, this is what I'm going to do. We're going to go figure something out. So I offered him my very first guy. His first name was Haywood. I'm not going to say his last name. Yeah. So he's like, I offered him to come stay at the house, and he's like, I just got this one little thing I need to take care of, court thing, da-da-da. So 2 weeks goes by, and he calls me. And the whole time I'm out there in the streets, man, I'm full
at that time by yourself. I mean, you literally are going up and down downtown Macon, through Central City Park, down by the Ocmulgee River at the Otis Redding Bridge, literally canvassing Macon, trying to find people who are experiencing homelessness.
Yeah. And looking back on my past, all those dicey situations I was in.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sitting there, and people are like, are you worried? I was like, man, if you knew the crap I did before, I got God on my side now. What? Yeah. You think something's going to happen to me? Nah. Yeah. Teflon Sean again, but this time for real, all because of God was with me,
Yeah.
So,
And that, not to fast forward the story, but there's so from all that,
yeah,
from Haywood, and then the door opens, and before it's over with, in that 2-story house, the one that I was referencing just a few minutes ago, big, beautiful 2-story house, you end up over. This is over the course of months and then eventually years. You end up bringing men off the streets into your home.
Yeah, 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 man. We built full size bunk beds. We had a total of 8 beds set up in there, and it was really neat, man. And in just a short period of time, we moved right at 87 people off the streets through the house, and the ultimate goal is to a rehab. You know, and I had this list of about 140 places they could choose from, and their whole job. I had 3, hardline phones in there, and their whole job was to find them a place to go. And
And so then, community, I mean, you ended up with the Train Trestle Ministry, you ended up shaping and forming kind of this community of volunteers that were so faithful. You built out a ministry. I mean, this is literally a person, never been to seminary, never, not the whole religious, I did all this stuff. It's like a person who went from passion, energy, devotion to what was tearing him down, to passion, energy, devotion to a God that was ready to build him up and restore him. And in that, God then began to surround you with like-minded people who were just as passionate, just as smidge crazy, that were willing. And I remember even in those years, even in that span, every time I would come to your house, the ministry had morphed. Like I come over there one time, and the bunk beds and all are in the house, but there's not much structure. And then I come over there like maybe a month, 45 days later, and there's floor freezers now where motorcycles used to be lined up, and it's chock full of meat and all of the proteins. And then I go inside, and where there was one fridge, there are 2 fridges, and then the next time I come, there's all the laundry is set up, and I mean, it's like, I can honestly say I have known God has been gracious, and I have known a lot of people who have sold out for Jesus, like what I call the kooks, not the people that just warm a pew or a bench or a seat and kind of play at religion. I'm talking about people who take it out into the world. I don't think I've ever been around a person who has done it as fast, as intense, and as obedient. And it's like I don't have to know the whole plan. I just got to know what you want from me today. I don't have to. I don't have to set up the 501c3 and then have to build the beds and then have to get. What about the funding? It's like you say, go love people. Okay, and that's a gift. I mean, if not for the background, if not for the hurts and the failures, if not for, I mean. So we and people are going to go try to find that first episode. I've taken all that down, so it's not out there anymore. If you want it that bad, let me know, and I can email you a file and you can listen to it. But in that first episode, you were sharing like we had no clue what we were doing. I mean, literally, we were spitballing. And before you know it, the Lord just kind of brings community in and around. And I mean, there's churches that get behind what you're doing to find out. And in that first interview, the thing that stuck out to me was like, and the feedback that we got from that, people were like, wasn't he scared? I mean, so he's got up to 8 guys in his home, literally in his house.
Mm-hmm.
Like, wasn't he scared? And I'm like, my response was like, you don't know Sean. You know what I mean? Like, from what he had been doing to what he was doing, this is tiddlywinks. I mean, it's Play-Doh. It's baby crap compared to, you know, and so my only point in all that rambling is our God has a way. The God of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob has a way of taking our failures and flipping them. And somehow from that hurt, we become healers. And what was meant to wreck and steal and kill and destroy ends up becoming almost our calling card, if you will. So, for time's sake, I know that you're over time. So the Train Trestle Ministry is launched. It becomes it goes gangbusters. 87, 86, 87?
86, 80, I think below, let's say 86.
86 guys come through, are served well, with excellence, treated. I mean, they had any of those men lived in your home the way that you do. I mean, they had, whatever it was that needed to be done in a home, they had access. It's not as if they were quarantined to one section. I mean, your house literally was their house. And so the next time our stories kind of cross intensely is, so there's this crux, right? And so, COVID hits. And so then the ability to bring guys in off the streets and put them in your house, and there's 2020, 2021 in that time. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like, again, you are reeling, like, okay, I thought this is what we were doing, but now I'm not sure. And people are asking, what about the train trestle in there? So then there's this pressure. And so let's talk through that, and then the kind of the morph into where you are now, what you're doing now personally, like in your personal life, but then also, ministry wise, because I don't want to get pinched off on the goodness of now. So
COVID hit, and rehabs were limiting their intake, and everybody, all the volunteers were getting nervous about going in the street. And, the CeeLo for me was that my dad said, look, son, if you keep going out there like that, you're not going to be able to come over here. I can't get COVID. And I can't get it from you. And so I was like, okay. So we all sat around and decided, okay, we still got 8 men in the house. We're not going to put anybody out. We're just going to work through these guys. We're going to get them into some rehabs, no matter how long it takes, and we'll stop for now. And so we stopped taking people in. We got those guys placed, and then COVID rocked on for a year and a half. The lockdown did, basically. It was real hard to get anything moving. Churches shut down after that and everything else, and so. I was sitting there, and I had, in some way along the way, I started giving my testimony, and I shared it at a couple of Celebrate Recoveries, which had become a staple for me taking my guys to, because in that environment, I felt safe to bring them in there because nobody's judging. Everybody in there is broken. And you're not showing up, you're not walking in those doors with a mask on, period. And so it was the community that we needed. And I had one at Southside of Warner Robinson that's led by Pat Chastain, and that guy is such a gifted speaker.
Yes, he is.
And then we had Terry Theus, who was over at the Assembly, and it's a Pentecostal church, Assembly of God type of deal, man. And so their worship was off the chain, and
Then I get invited to go up to Eatonton and give my testimony one night. And I'm not sure how I met that guy, but so I go up there and I just gave my testimony. It happened to be that the pastor of that church was sitting in the church at the time. I didn't think anything of it. I got up and headed on back. Well, that church wound up shutting down, because of COVID. And part of that was he shut down his Celebrate Recovery. Well, towards the end of COVID, right around that time, I'm trying to figure out, what am I supposed to do? What have you got for me now, God? This joker calls me and says, "Hey, man, how do you feel about leading our Celebrate Recovery?" And it's like, you got the wrong guy. Just hands down, you got the wrong guy. He goes, no. I mean, think about it. Would you do it? I said, it's not a question of whether I would. I'm telling you, you're wrong. You shouldn't pick me. He's like, well, I tell you what, would you come up here and just meet with me? I was like, okay. I mean, I'll go sit down and talk with you. So I'll go up and he cooks chili one night. I go up there and I sit down, and that guy's got a silver tongue, Ben, because he taught me into leading Celebrate Recovery. And as it turns out, during COVID, because he had shut down that Celebrate Recovery, every leader he had in there relapsed.
Oh, wow.
Relapsed and either was
I did
dead.
not know that. Yeah.
Yeah, they were either dead, they were in prison, or they were so far gone that you could look at them and tell they were in trouble, right? Physically tell they were in trouble.
I never knew that.
So I step into that, yeah. And I mean, so I step into it and just started going. And along the way, I made a friend of mine, first, other than you, my first pastor friend. That don't take this wrong, but that Lily White, that Martha White looking guy that's, probably never done anything wrong mostly in his life. And
not us.
No, not me. Definitely not me. I'm not casting any shade on you, brother, but definitely not me, right?
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
I mean, I consider you my friend, and we've played that, what was that? Indoor golf we used to play at the house way back when.
Oh, yeah.
So, anyway, we are. This guy calls me his friend from the stage at church one day in the middle of his sermon, and to this day he's known as my friend Phil. That's how he saved in my phone. When I answer the phone, it's my friend Phil. What's happening?
Amen,
man. So anyway, I start sharing with him what's going on up here, and I'm bouncing ideas for sermons off of him, and I'm just it becomes my new fire. I talk to you about how to write messages. How do you do it? I was thirsting to be better, and I still do to this day. I mean, it's talk about being unequipped, right? Being completely not the guy that's supposed to be leading anything, right? Luckily for me, it was a small CR, and it has grown, but it's still not huge by any means, but it's what most Celebrate Recoveries are throughout the country. Well, one day I'm sitting there on a Sunday, and we're standing at the little greeting desk, because I would always get to church early, in between the first and second service, and hang out with some people. It was my social time to a certain degree, cutting up. Phil was standing there. We were talking about the week, and somebody came up, and I was telling him about somebody that had just given their life to Christ at our Celebrate that one in Eatonton, and how I was going to give my testimony somewhere or whatever. So I said, "Where's that at?" I told him, I said, "Celebrate Recovery," and the lady said, "We need one of those here."
Where's here?
At Northway Church in Macon, my home church.
Okay.
And so the next one comes up and says, "What are y'all talking about?" I said, "Celebrate Recovery, She goes, "Oh, my dad needs one of those. We need one of those here." And within a span of 3 minutes, 3 different people came up and said the same thing.
Wow.
And I looked at Phil. I said, "I guess it's about time." He said, "Who's going to lead it?" I said, "I will for a season." I said, "If that's what it takes, if
if you've got somebody better, then by all means. Uh, but I'm willing to start it. He's like, well, let's pray about it. I don't really know what that means. That doesn't register with me. I'm like, either we're going to do it or we're not. Let's get going. I got stuff to do. We got to start spinning wheels. But God's timing, the way that church did it, it was exactly the way CR laid it out. We asked for people who might be interested in volunteering. And then on day one, there were 75 people show up.
How big a church is it? Like contextually,
I'd say there's probably 800 people usually on Sunday between the two services.
Okay.
The role I
big
think
church.
is a lot. Yeah, big church. But to have 75 people show up to something, I meet. Now I'm completely intimidated. All right, so they got deacons that are showing up to be a part of this. And I go back to Phil and say, hey, any of these names you feel like need to lead this? He goes, no. You're the guy. I'm like, wow. Look, man, I'm telling you, there's some people here I know that know the scripture a whole lot better than I do. No. So we start right then. Went through about 4 months, launched it. On the first night of our CR, we had roughly 300 people show up.
Wow.
And since then, after the first couple of them, it falls off a little bit. So we hit about 100 and a quarter for a little while. And now we're up to about 250. I don't count. I'm just listening to what they tell me. I look out there and I still get scared to death when I start to open up my mouth. So, I figure that's enough people. It scares me. So.
Good.
But in all of that, man, God He poured into me. He gave me so like your first fire for me was enough for me to read that Bible cover to cover and to start a second time. But then now I've got a reason to read. Now I've got a purpose in what I'm looking for. Now I'm looking for messages. I'm hunting out things to be able to talk about, ways to be able to communicate. And, man, it's just been, it's all God the whole way through. He had his hand in this.
Amen.
There are some deacons in there that came along at the very beginning and were like, who is this guy? And one of them even one day finally just confronted me, says, so who are you? I said, I'm Sean King. He goes, well,
that's a loaded question, man.
I know, right? He goes, do you work for the church? I'm like, Lord, no. They wouldn't hire me. He goes, well, do you work for Celebrate Recovery? I said, no, man, I'm just a volunteer. I go to this church. He goes, oh, so what do you do? I said, I work for AT&T. I'm an engineer there. That's what I do. He goes, I wouldn't tell anybody. I'm like, okay, so I keep it a secret if you will. That's fine.
Yeah.
So the skeptics were there, but as we worked through, so I took all of them through a 12-step. And as we went through that 12-step process, they bought in. And they saw how this is not just a template, but it's a discipleship program.
Amen.
And it gets people to talk about those things that you really don't want to say out loud, and allows for real healing to happen. And so, anyway, back to the whole launch. And so I've been leading this thing. We launched in December 4th of 2022. This is 2021. So we've been at it a year and a half now.
Yeah.
And
so for people who are listening to this, Celebrate Recovery, they have this alliteration that uses the letter H. Tell for those who are listening that don't know what Celebrate Recovery is, in the 1 minute elevator spiel, what is Celebrate Recovery?
It is a Christian version of AA or NA. It is a safe place where people can come in and take the mask off, and we can talk about the real hurts that are driving our compulsive behaviors. And when we talk about, go ahead.
It's hurts, hang-ups.
And habits, yeah.
Hang-ups, habits.
Yep, hurts, habits, and hangups. It rolls off my tongue differently. I don't
Hurts,
know.
habits, and hang-ups. Okay, that's
Yeah,
what I was trying to remember. I knew there were three H's, and I knew
yeah,
hurts, and I knew habits. No, I knew
yeah,
hurts, and I knew hang-ups.
yeah.
So, all
So,
right.
what I've come to learn is that a lot of the compulsive behaviors, the things that we do that we don't understand why we do, that Paul talks about. Why is it that I do the things that I don't want to do, but the things I
Yeah,
want to do,
Romans 7. Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So that little piece, a lot of it has to do with unresolved hurt in our life, and some of it's shame.
Mm-hmm.
So by offering forgiveness and asking for forgiveness from a place of vulnerability, um, we finally start letting this stuff just kind of shed off our shoulders, and we start
Amen,
walking
man.
a little bit lighter. And so I personally I did 2 12 steps. The second one was with a guy named Harvey Brown, who was part of the train trestle to talk about that community.
Okay.
He's now a regional director for CR here in Georgia,
Wow.
and
So is CR, for anybody listening, because this will go all over,
yeah,
is CR a nationwide thing? So if
yeah,
somebody right this moment is wrestling with their past, guilt, shame, addiction, uh, any and all, are there Celebrate Recovery ministries pretty much anywhere?
yeah, it's actually worldwide, Ben, and it's you
Okay.
can go to celebraterecovery.org, and there's a little button on there where you click uh, find a group, and you type in your zip code and tell it how big of a range you're willing to look. And I mean, I found one for
Awesome.
a cousin of mine in Louisiana. She wasn't sure, so I sent her 3. I said, "Here, check these out."
And And if y'all are listening to this, if I can figure out how, I'll put a link to cr.org, or I'll find that link and I'll put it in the comments or the show notes. I don't know how that works, but I'll figure it out before when I post this thing. And that way, if you're listening to this, you should be able to find a link and click it and find one near you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. I mean, there's people all around, but so I guess to keep going from there, um, you know, God's just been so good in the way that He put that thing together, and just I stand in awe every single night when I
Amen, man.
that this I still question their judgment. That they're going to give me a microphone. You know,
Me too.
right? But it's
The stars are going to align sometime, and I'm actually going to be in town on a CR night, and I'm just going to slip in the back door. I don't even think I'm going to tell you I'm coming. I'm just going to slip in the back door and get me a good old fill up of Sean King. I am way overdue.
man, I'd love it. Just before you leave, let me know you were there, please.
Yeah.
Maybe take you to dinner afterwards. We'll go to Waffle House or something.
Yes.
But man, so
Yes.
this thing has been, in all of this, the train trestle, and then celebrate recovery, and everything that I'm doing. I have people who say thanks or whatever, but brother, let me tell you, I have already gotten my reward. I have
Amen.
been able to see life change happen before my eyes.
Amen.
I've watched people come off the street and are fulfilling their lives, are living a good life, have got a job, they're taking care of family members now. And so, they don't. I had a guy, first name Billy. He came to me and was using 400 milligrams of Oxycontin a day,
Wow.
and had used that day. And he came through the house, and he gets there and he says, "So, man, I'm all in. When do I go to rehab?" I said, "Ain't gonna be no rehab." He goes, "Well, what do you mean? I need to go to detox." I'm like, "No, man, you don't need detox." He goes, "Man, I've gotten clean 4 different times. I got to go to detox." I was like, "Look, man, you're with me now. I said, we're sitting in this house, and I'm going to tell you now, if you're going to try life God's way, it don't start at a detox. He looked at me like I had 3 heads. Now, public disclaimer, I'm not telling everybody that you should do this, okay?
Yeah.
Because you can die from this stuff. But
Sure.
I told him, I said, if it gets bad enough, I'll take you. That man made it all the way through 4 days. Worst thing he had was some runs, and man, he did it right. He went to one place, a rehab, and then left from there and went to another one called Crossroads here in Macon, man. And I love those people. Brad and Jody shout out to you. I watched him go all the way through there. And so, Ben, he comes on Monday night to see us, and I get to see him. And every time I do, I get my blessing.
Yeah.
And he's just one of the 80. And then people that are just in CR, I get my blessing because I see them. And I see God working in them. It didn't have anything to do with me. Dude, if you take God out of me, I'm back out there on them streets hustling, acting the fool.
Yeah.
But, with him poured into me, you're getting a whole nother version of who I am. And
you're getting the real version.
Yes.
You're getting the real version of who you are.
Amen.
A version that all of us that love you have known and seen, and it's the reason why people you are magnetic, and it's the authenticity, and people are seeing now the facade, the mask, the persona is gone. And what folks are seeing is the vulnerability and the love. And don't get me wrong, I always want to make sure you're on my team. But the public and the greater good are now able to see the teddy bear. And so you talked about an early failed marriage. You talked about kind of a middle of this story, failed marriage. Let's talk about where you are now and pick back up on the relationship that you got the word maybe to break off early. Let's kind of, as much as you're willing to share, let's talk about the restoration. So we've talked about the spiritual restoration. Let's talk about the relationships. We've talked about what God has done through you for others. Let's talk a little bit about what God has done in you for you.
Give me 1 second. I'm going to turn on this light. It'll only take a second because I realize my background's so dark I can barely see.
Yeah. Perfect.
All right. So, I don't. Oh yeah, I do remember the day, May 16th of last year.
Mm-hmm.
I get a phone call, and it's probably the 13th when I got the phone call because that was a Wednesday, and we were gonna. Sherry called me and said, "Look, what do you think about us? Talking about getting back together."
How many years is this since you broke it off?
4 years.
4 years.
4 years.
Go ahead. I got questions, but I don't want to interrupt the train of thought. Go ahead.
So the very first thing I do is I call Phil, my friend Phil. I said, man, because I select people who have the right to come to me and get in my business and ask me how I'm doing because I need that accountability.
Is he your pastor? He's your pastor?
He's the lead. Yeah.
Okay.
He's not the head pastor of the church, but he's one of the pastors there.
Okay.
And so I called him up and I said, hey man, we talk about it. He goes, okay, let's pray about it. I said, okay. And so he prays for me and for her and he says, God, if you would just send us a sign. Just let us know up front whether this is real or whether this is something else.
Sure.
And so we sit down, we talk that Friday, and Saturday she calls and says, we went to dinner, and I was like, I'm doing a lot. I'm going here, I'm doing this. I'm in this home team. I'm, and trying to kind of just gracefully go ahead and set the role for, you're not wanting to sign up for this, right? Hands down, I loved her, and I knew I did, but I didn't want to hurt myself or her. And so we pray, and Saturday, unprompted, she calls, and we're talking, and she says, hey, would it be all right if I came to church with you on Sunday?
Well,
I said, absolutely. Absolutely, no trouble. So she said, what about this CR stuff? Could I come Monday and Thursday with you? I was like, yeah, absolutely.
so is Thursday still Eatonton?
Yeah, Thursday was Eatonton and still is. And
So
Monday is Northwest.
you're running the CR group in Macon on Mondays, and you're still running the CR group in Eatonton on Thursdays. And Eatonton is 45 minutes away, hour
Well,
away.
it was an hour when I was in Macon. Now it's about 30 minutes away. I'm in Gray.
Okay.
So,
All right.
so
Sorry.
yeah.
Just for people who are listening who don't know, because there'll be Missouri folks and folks out west listening, and so you're working a full-time job engineering for AT&T, running a 250 average CR on Monday nights, and then running a separate CR 30 minutes away on Thursday nights.
Yeah, and then and just for full disclosure, on Wednesdays, I would go down to Dublin and teach a message down there during the day to a rehab that I'd become fond of, and then I'd come back. And so that was all going on. And so let's talk about, let me tell you how God worked before that ever happened, though. So I had a job when I was over in Alabama, and even when I came back to Georgia, that man was just grueling. I worked for some people who were kind of hard to work for, and in a company where things were tough. It was very demanding, and I had basically from I-20 to Florida and Alabama to the ocean was my area, and was responsible for a whole lot of stuff, including money, people, materials. So one day I get a phone call, and it's one of the people who was a customer of ours, which was AT&T, and he said, there's going to be a slot open. Didn't know if you might want to apply. I'm like, well, heck yeah. I want to do that. So I apply, and I sign up. I'm like, okay. Then my work went from that big area. My area got cut in half. And if you're with AT&T, just turn this off for the next little minute, okay? My area got cut in half. I have no more direct reports, meaning people. I don't have to worry about material. I had been working so hard, putting in 60 hours back then, still doing the same stuff. And now all of a sudden, dude, I got the best job in the world. I'm just thankful I have it, and I hope they keep sending checks. I mean, this has been it's the best job I've ever had. I'm like,
and in that, then there's a creation in there. There's a creation of space and time where you can do that and ministry.
Absolutely, because without it, I was going to run myself. I was burning the candle at both ends and in the middle too.
So but God provided. Yeah.
Yes, He did. And I didn't even ask. He just opened up that door and made that better. And then so
Sherry calls, asks if she can go to church. She asks if she can go with you on Monday. She asks if you can go with you on Thursday. I'm sorry. I get, and that's the beauty of this podcast. In full disclosure, I said it from way back in the way back. We're getting friends online. We're hitting record, and you all just get to eavesdrop on us, So, okay, so let's bring it back off the pig trail. So she asked if she can go, and then what?
So Sherry and I, we start dating. I'm convinced early on. The first time I met her, I was already ready to ask her to marry me. November of last year, I asked her to marry me, and I questioned her judgment, but she said yes. And it's really neat because when she asked me what day I wanted to get married on, I took her birthdays.
she's born November 21st. I'm born November 11th. And I wanted something to celebrate halfway out. Halfway out would have been May 16th, the same day she called. As it turns out, that was the middle of the week, so we backed it up. Guess what day the next day was? May 13th, the day that we actually talked on the phone, and the day that all happened. So the first date was on the 16th. That was on the 13th. I'm like, okay, I don't need. God, I was already in, but thank you for the extra confirmations in here. So we get married, and we've. I'm still here at the house, and as of the time of this, I'm still leading the one in Eatonton, and I think that that along the way, some people have come along who have gone through a 12-step under me, and I think God has a guy for that ministry right there that is local to Eatonton, that has a heart for it. Conversations have taken place between me and the pastor. I don't know if the pastor has actually talked to him or not, but about, because, ultimately we're supposed to replace ourselves. We're supposed to duplicate what we're doing. And I feel pretty good that, by the next time we do one of these, I probably won't be leading Eatonton anymore, but I don't think that God's freeing me up of that without getting ready to play something else for me. I don't know what it is. I've got too much energy, and if that's not the case, then okay, I'll just do what I do. Yeah. But so there's been that. I'm in the best relationship I've ever been in my life. We are surrounded by a home team that is part of our church that is incredible. The Alfords and the Chowdas and about 9 other people in there that we just have bonded with and that we're doing life with. And then so there's this I'm gonna call normal Christian life over here, and then I've got CR circles over here, and so we're plugging in every chance that we get, and it's just the relationships that you make, the people that you meet, and the way that they pour into you. It's just been a real blessing. But at our wedding, an outlaw came to that wedding who we had some rough days with, right? But it was really neat. I had him there, and he'll always be a brother of mine. First name Sam. Love him. He came. My sister. So we had this meeting at this wedding, brother. The dynamics were off the chain. Okay.
Amen.
We had outlaws there. We had U.S. Marshals there. We had my pastor was there. Deacons from our church were there. Home team was there. We had our party crew that was there. It's like you just throw it in, and every facet that you could imagine in there was there at one time. And we intentionally wanted this, in my mind, and the people that came from the church caught on to it pretty quickly, that they were kind of on mission, at our wedding, and we wanted to make them feel welcome and guest. But it was so beautiful the way that all played out. We're still
it's authentic community.
Yeah.
It's authentic, which is what the Simplify project is all about, is cultivating authentic community wherever you are.
And see, I've been in communities where everybody wore the mask, right? Where even in the Christian community, where too many times you go up and you can tell something's off with somebody and say, "Hey, man, are you okay? Are you all right?" And they say, yeah, I'm fine, I'm fine, everything's good. It's like, okay.
and then you find out later that they were struggling with something, and it winds up wrecking, being 10 times worse than what it had to be. And it's like, look, man, when I had to tell somebody, I called a friend of mine out on it. I said, look, man, I said, you're going in here to church. I said, it's like you're going into the hospital and you're telling people about a fever that you have. And they're giving you Tylenol for the fever, and you're walking out and you're mad at the hospital and at the doctor, when in truth you got an infection from a cut in your leg that's causing the fever in the first place. And you want to talk about the fever, but not about that cut that's causing the fever. I said, if you'd have told the doctor
That's
about
good.
the cut, then you'd have been fine. Now, take the mask off. Be real. When I ask you if you're okay, don't tell me that you're having troubles at work. Tell me that you're having troubles at work because something else is failing in your life and you're not sleeping.
That's good.
The one thing that I love about CR, and it's something I use this quote, is from a book called The Cure. And I use it periodically, especially on testimony night at a Celebrate Recovery. And I tell people, I said, what if there's a place so safe that the worst of you could be known? Could be known, and you'd be loved more in the telling of it. That the worst, you could tell me the worst thing you could ever tell me, and instead of judging or placing shame or guilt, I'm just going to love you more because you shared it. That's what
Man,
CR
may
is.
all of our relationships and communities be like that.
Man,
all right. So as we wrap up, you and I can, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead. I'm not going to cut you off. If you got it, go. What you got?
We've been going for a minute, but yeah, I was agreeing with you, man.
Yeah.
Community and authentic community, it changes lives, and being vulnerable. I think some of the things that CR talks about, like there's 5 rules, but the most important of those is what is said here stays here. The gift of anonymity. You and I talked about one day about sin eaters. About somebody just dumping something on you, and it's like it died right here. It didn't have to go any further, brother. The Bible says, real simply, confess your sins to one another so that you may be healed. It didn't say anything about forgiven. It said so that you may be healed. And man, when we get authentic and we share that dirt stuff, it's like it takes the weight, cuts it in half. And when you have community around you that you can just be real with and go in and sit down and go, man, today
sucked.
Yeah, absolutely.
They sucked. Yeah.
I had to call somebody today and say, look, man, I got up this morning and I was chewing nails before my feet hit the bed. And I'm like, really? I was like, yeah. So, but I've got those people in my life now and it makes a difference. And if I could give anybody a gift, it would be the gift of authentic community. It wouldn't be money.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be fame. It wouldn't be fortune. It'd be that gift of authentic, because in that, you can find answers, you can find support, you can find direction, you can find people to bounce stupid ideas off before you do them. Life just will become so much better.
Amen, man. So every episode you haven't watched, so before we prayed, I asked, hey, have you watched any of the first 2 episodes? You're like, no, not yet. I didn't want it to sway or change how our interview would go. But so you won't be familiar with this question, so you're fixing to be put on the spot. But every episode I end it with, the name of this podcast is the Keep It Simple Podcast. And so the question here at the end is, how do you keep it simple?
I don't complicate my relationship with God.
Amen.
He is in control. And I worship him and give him thanks. Man, I've been set free from something. I've been saved from something. And I don't lose sight of that. I just keep it simple. He loves me. He wants the best for me. He's got rules for me that that are independent for me because of my knuckleheaded ways and the way that my head's wired. There are rules that apply to me that don't necessarily apply to everybody else, but He's revealing them to me. And if I just relax and go, you know what? He loves me. In spite of myself, He loves me. That's how I just keep it simple, brother. I just, on my bad days, He loves me. On my good days, He loves me. And everything in between.
Amen.
I just remind myself that He loves me. And, I figure as long as I'm here, I must have another purpose. Let's find out what that is.
Amen, man. He loves you. I love you. Hey, thank you for the time. Thank you for the vulnerability, for sharing your story, walking us through the hurts and the hang-ups and the habits, the redemption, the restoration. Thank you.
I love you, man.
And I love you.
I love you, brother.
Talk to you soon, brother. See you.
Keep doing what you do.
See
Go
you.
get them. See you, brother.
Yeah.